And we're live. Hey everybody, thanks for coming out for the live show for the Black SFFathon Year 3. I'm Chloe Thistle Verse, the creator of this readathon. I'm joined today by my wonderful co-hosts Jerry of Onyx Pages and Noria of Chronicles of Noria. Do you guys want to introduce yourself real quick?
Go, Noria.
Hi everybody, I'm Noria. I read a lot of fantasy, some science fiction, some literary fiction, and I am trying to recover my lost childhood by reading a lot of middle grade fiction because I didn't get to do enough reading when I was a child. This is my third. I think this is my third year, right? This is my third year co-hosting Black SFFathon. It's been so great, and I'm so happy to see you all again for our book discussion and the wrap of this amazing readathon.
I'm in Jerry from Onyx Pages. I read Black speculative fiction. Um, and yeah, I'm super happy to be here. I really am looking forward to talking about Shoma's Land. And this is my third time as well being a part of the Black SFFathon. And I'm super grateful to have this space to talk. So looking forward to it.
Regina Renee says, "Love your laugh, Noria." Thanks for joining, Regina Renee. Noria's laugh is infectious. And I wanted to give a quick acknowledgement to the two co-hosts who couldn't be here today. Arlene of Block Press Books, who is a fantastic bookstagrammer, is not feeling well, so she couldn't join us. And Lucy of Lucy Reads, another YouTuber, kind of told us that she could help with like support stuff before the event, wasn't able to do stuff during the event. So I wanted to shout her out because she was helpful with like giving directions for graphics and stuff like that and being a sounding board. So, yep. Those were all the co-hosts, and in general, were people what did people actually read for Black SFFathon this year? I just read the short story.
You just read a short story.
That was it.
I read two. Let me just grab them. I read two books and a short story. One is, I guess, a bit of a cheat because I had already sort of started, but I read Bad Witch Burning by Jessica Lewis, and I read Lakewood by Megan Giddings, and then I read the short story that we're going to talk about today.
How'd you like them?
That's a good question. So in Bad Witch Burning, we're following let me find her, Cottrell. And Cottrell is she's a high school student. She lives with her mother and her mother's boyfriends as they cycle in and out. Um, and she has the ability to communicate with the dead by writing letters to them. And she, like, very quickly in the beginning of the book, she realizes that her power has expanded. She's able to do more things, and because she lives in basically in she lives in poverty. Her mother doesn't work, and her mother's boyfriend is a drug dealer and extremely violent. They both are quite violent toward her. She has to engage in magical endeavors in exchange for money, and she lives in a very challenging neighborhood. So it's an interesting story. The premise was pretty cool. There's a lot of like the dead among us, and it wasn't super like magic fantasy heavy, from my perspective, but it was scary in a way. But there was a lot of social commentary, and I think for me, um, to read a what I think was is a YA novel, pretty contemporary, with themes of like race and class and gender, that was really interesting for me. So the main character, Cottrell, she makes choices specifically because she is the only wage earner in her family, and her mother's boyfriend steal her money. So it's not like a lot of those stories where it's just like, oh, this person has powers and now they use them to save the universe, or they use them for community. Like, she's literally using her magical powers in order to survive and take care of the people that she loves. And because of her circumstances, her choices are perhaps not the same as what we would expect somebody with those powers to choose. So I enjoyed it. It wasn't like super on the top of my list of anything, but I did enjoy it. It really, really kept me engaged and committed. And then with respect to Lakewood and Megan Giddings, this was also horror. The kind of horror that I like, which is more psychological horror, the horror that human beings visit upon themselves. And in this case, very similarly, there's a young Black woman who drops out of college. And also in the other book, the main character is planning to drop out of high school and not graduate. In this book, we have a Black woman who's taking care of her mother who has a disability. At the beginning of the story, her grandmother dies. So like she's straight off of the funeral. Now she's trying to figure out how to take care of her mom. And so she decides to participate in a study. And she has to basically sign away all of her rights. She has no information about what this study is. And it's a very violent and aggressive study. And, she's doing this because she wants to be able to get health insurance for her mom and to ensure financial stability for her small family. And it just takes us through this like psychological horror. And the questions that we're asking are, what's the study about? Who's responsible for it? What has she given? What has she sacrificed? Was it worth it? How far do we go for the people we love? So quite unwittingly, in both of these stories, we've got like main characters who are Black, who are women, who are making decisions because their need to survive. And those choices are harmful to them in some ways. So I enjoyed Lakewood more than I enjoyed Bad Witch Burning, mostly because I like adult books and adult protagonists at this point in my life. But they were both really good, and I think they're really, really good good conversation starters, I think. So that's what I read, and then Shioma's Land.
What about you, Noria?
For me, I did read Showman's Land. In fact, I think I read 1.5 books. Showman's Land being the book I actually finished. The second book, the book I started and I'm still reading, I haven't finished it yet, is By Sea and Sky by Antoine Van Gilly. And I love the concept of pirates. I love pirates. I think that, of course, we do have the ones in history that have been very murderous, and a lot of them were also, active participants in slave trade, etc., etc. But like fantasy fictional pirates, I really love them. Also because of the fact that I guess maybe I've always seen fictional pirates, depending on the story in which they are featured, being ones that are challenging a system of oppression or challenging the status quo or existing outside the line of like a government or a people that would rather have like their citizenry act in a certain way. And in this case, this book features a woman, a Black woman, Zala, who is a pirate, and not a pirate by choice, right? Because just as with when it is that a lot of people step outside of a vocation that they've been in for a while, she did it. She and her husband Jelani did it out of desperation. It has this particular illness and it needs certain rare herbs, which they exist in a time and their territories are being conquered by a larger empire, right, that has within its own borders most of the herbs that her people need to survive, and that's like her husband needs for his healing. So they go out, join this pirate group and are trying to source for every sort of cure. And I like the fact that, like, even with all of that, you had someone like Jelani, who is clearly, who is, one would say, dying because of just how desperate they are to get the cure, and they're getting herbs to just mitigate the symptoms whilst they try and find, something final. And even with that, he's still sharing those herbs with other people like him who feel that pain, and there's just something about this communal, we're in it together to survive, that I really love that, Antoine Bandele explored in this. There's a third character, Kareem, who is more of the antagonist, but the way in which the story is woven, I guess for me, it's more of a case of you have these two characters, protagonist and antagonist, who know what they want to do and who go out and set out to do it. And unfortunately, their wins and their brilliance are being hindered by like the inept commanding officers that are both like in charge. And I like the fact that that kind of leveled the playing field, because neither protagonist nor antagonist had the leg up over the other person. They are playing this game of chess to try and get things done, and you have all of this happening. But all of this is even at the beginning, because I don't want to go into that much spoilers, but Jelani gets kidnapped, and for the first time in a while, and that is why I was like, okay, I'm very intrigued by this. It is Zala that goes out and sets out to rescue her husband. She's like, you're in trouble, and I'm going to get you back. And even from like the first introduction, that has always been their relationship. This is a couple that trust each other, that believe in each other's strength, that would, help the other person when the other person needs help. And it's just set in this fantasy world of people who kind of have like feline characteristics, fairies that can fly and do magic, people that can do magic, a flying ship. That is it, like a flying pirate ship, which, yes, I had a thing about the old Flying Dutchman. So I was squealing, because I was like, Anton Bandele was like, all of these magical things that we've seen about that have been very told through this Western European lens, I'm going to set it in this black magical world, black and Middle Eastern magical world, and I'm going to feed you well. And it's great. So I've not finished it yet, but I am definitely going to finish it before the end of the month, because it's actually really interesting. And this is the first book I'm reading in a long while. So thank the universe for that. But that is basically what I read for the Black SFFathon.
Nice. Sounds like I need to be adding these books higher on my TBR, I say, knowing that my will to read has been slipping away from me as the sun has left the sky, but I can try. But it's interesting, I guess, hearing people talk about what was coming up in their books, because I think a lot of that also ties into Shioma's Land and Filter House as well, like having to make difficult decisions for your survival, having to try and live outside of this coercive society. So it's just interesting reading connections I'm seeing. But I was wondering, I guess, how frequently does everyone read short stories? And I guess, what were like your initial impressions of like this as a short story?
I have a lot of short story collections, and there are so many, and I hope we can talk about that. Like
Okay.
there's so many short story collections right now in Black speculative fiction that are just coming out, or have come out this year or in the past couple of years that I do want to sort of talk about. But I read short stories whenever, usually I read them in anthologies, and I tend to tire of short story collections just because I really like the immersive experience of a longer form work. And so when I read a lot of short stories, it can be tough because I find myself wanting more of the world. But I also appreciate that it's far easier to get a short.
And Jerry, I think your sound is cutting out for me at least. I heard you say it's easier to get
I
short
was
work
worried.
published, and then after that, it kind of
And that
went
was it.
silent.
Yeah. Yes, you're kind of we can't hear you. Like music played, so I was not sure if maybe like your speakers like something else. Mm. That was actually very science fiction.
What happened?
There's this weird like growling noise that
Okay.
said
Oh, we can hear you
hello,
now.
but
Oh,
you were muted.
It was science.
okay.
But your sound is normal now.
Okay, good.
So you're saying it's easier to get a short work published, but
Yes, and so if you really want to support writers who are just coming up and just starting to get into the market, then you need to be reading, you know, electronically published magazines like you do, Chloe, and blogs, and then like short story collections and anthologies. I think in that order. Um, and so I've just resigned myself to the fact that I'm going to have to read more short stories, even though I often find it shocking to be like out of a world and then bang into another one. Okay, now we have mermaids. Now they're vampires. Now this is like an institution. Oh, look, there's like a haunted house, right? Like it's just sort of a lot to get into. But I just started Unfettered Hexes. Oh, sorry. Your other question was, what did you think of Shoma's Land, just generally as a short story?
yeah.
I liked it. I liked it. I felt that I got, for me, it was more about the relationships between the characters. I felt that the world building was a little bit spotty, in some like unfinished in some places. And I think like sometimes it's sort of like a pencil sketch, and all you have is the background for the parts that actually matter, but not a lot more. So I think that's what Nisi has done in a lot of their short stories anyway. So I kind of expected that, but I liked it.
How about for you, Noria?
Okay. So for me, I do read some short stories. I think I'm enjoying that. I like more longer work because the opportunity to immerse myself. But when I do find like a short story collection that I really love, they end up becoming one of my favorites because I do think that it takes a certain level of expertise and skill to write a short story. And I think that writers that are good at telling short stories, they don't get the level of love that they deserve and I respect because it takes a lot. Like, it's easier for you to, especially when you're writing and telling the story, like Jerry's mentioned, you have this full scale world that you're trying to give as many information as possible. And the short story writer has learned how to edit and edit and edit and edit in a way that still is able to tell a comprehensive story in a short amount of time. And I think that that is actually really cool. Some of my favorite stories, one of my favorite books are short story collections. I got, and some of the best like books I've been given have also been short story collections. I still take time to reread what it means when a man falls from the sky because listening to Nick Arimas, that was just brilliant. I would say though that I prefer like short stories. Like if it's an anthology with like different writers, I always prefer when it is that like they stick to a genre because sometimes I'm like, yo, okay, I just go from like literary fiction and now somebody is saying fantasy and now someone is saying science fiction and now someone is doing this and I'm just like my brain is just like what is happening. So there's usually that focus. But if it is like a singular writer, then it's easier because like you can tell with the writing style and flow. So in answer to that question, I don't read as much short stories as I should, but the ones that I've read are beloved and I love them for a reason. I did really enjoy Shioma's Land. I think that, when the story starts in such a dramatic way, and I'm like, Missy, oh my God, wow, that's a very strong choice to start, and everything else. And then the way it progresses, the way it ended, and there's just, I think for me, like, Shioma's Land maintained the beauty. The thing I love about short stories is like we're going to peel back the curtain a little to give you a glimpse into this world and into these people's lives. And then after you get that short glimpse, we're going to close back those curtains and you can go on with the rest of your with your rest of your day, imagining what their life looks like beyond that point. And I really got that with Shoma's Land, especially with the way it ended. Because I wanted more, but I was also satisfied in that that was just one complete story in itself. And we can continue with that. I'm not going to go into further details until we get further into the discussion of the story. But yeah, I really did enjoy it. It was a great choice. Thank you, Chloe.
Yeah, I'm glad it worked out. Because yeah, I know the short stories can be kind of disorienting for people because they're is a lot of like you have to pick things up really quickly and like on the fly with the world building. So I was trying to find a story where it like kind of felt, and also sometimes they can feel like a little they leave people wanting more sometimes. Like people feel like it feels like unfinished or something like that. So I wanted something where it felt like the whole story, like beginning, middle, and end was here. And also where it wasn't like too overwhelming with like background stuff. So I'm glad it worked out for people. Um what did I think? So I read short stories like fairly frequently. I haven't been great about it this year. Like I just have been neglecting it this year. Like I started a log to keep myself like on top of stuff, and I was like, wow, I didn't really start reading like committed short stories until like August this year, which is not the best, but it is what it is. And for this one, I listened to the audiobook for the reread because like I'm just really bad at audios, and I was like, I really want to try and get into them. And it actually worked for me. It's like an hour. I think the narrator is Kate Baker, and I enjoyed the
Yeah,
story.
an hour, 10 minutes. It was an hour, 10 minutes.
Okay. Did you listen to it too, Noria?
So did I.
Yeah, I did. It was
How
it
did it
was
compare for
lovely.
you? Because I know you read
Oh, I
more
think
audiobooks than I do.
yes. I really enjoyed it. And usually a lot of times when I'm listening to audiobooks, I like to listen to them at like maybe 1.5 times the speed. Never at like the regular speed because I'm like the way in which the narrators read this stuff, I'm like, get to it, get to it. But this was the first audiobook in a long while that I did not speed up. Like I was like, I'm going to take this and like really settle into it. It was done so well. It was done so well.
So, what did people think of like divinity and godhood in this story? Because I feel like the way that it's set up is like pretty different from like other god stories I've read.
I really enjoyed that the gods were not as virtuous or far away from mortals as they sometimes can be. Um, so I like that we find out a little bit more about the relationship between gods and mortals, and but we're given a little bit of distance at the beginning so that we can sort of wonder how they come to be and what their relationship is. Um, the gods that we were exposed to in the story, I mean, there are three main ones from my recollection, and they were kind of like, man, like they can do interesting things, and they're not particularly engaged in, like, they're very self-centered, and they're interested in what they like, and they pursue things because they've got power, and they throw a bone to mortals, and then they continue doing what they do until they're done, and then they just die, right? Like, it just, there's nothing really compassionate or virtuous or meaningful about their existence. And that's interesting to me, because I was introduced to gods a little bit differently, and so gods, or god was always supposed to be sort of some kind of very principled entity, and so to have these you know capricious little twits that happen to have a lot of power and can really impact us just seemed odd, but also a delight in a way. I also felt though that um, I didn't I didn't really um, I didn't get much of a pantheon, which is what I like, as well. Like, we got individual gods doing things and engaging with each other, but I didn't get a sense of like the community of gods. And I would have liked to see how it was structured and organized.
Okay, before I speak, I like, are we allowed to say some spoilers? I'm assuming everybody watching us is like read the book.
Yeah, I
I
feel
hope.
yeah. If people don't know, we're going to be doing spoilers. We're going to be talking about the ending and stuff. So, unfortunately, you might want to head out if you haven't, if that bothers you.
Right, right. Because I I really found it interesting. I liked the fact that, when Amma was talking to Shioma, and the exploration of what it means to be a god and the history of the gods. And you know, Alma confesses that, oh, gods used to be mortals, you know, that they originated as mortals and then ascended in a way and became more than mortals, which was the reason why, even though they sometimes treated mortals as like their pets and things in which, you know, they can look at, they also draw inspiration and sometimes also give them inspiration because, you know, that is their origin. And I found it interesting because, for example, oh, sorry, series of ISA, if you didn't catch that. Not talking to you, Siri. Okay, so what was that? Oh yes, which I found very interesting because, for example, um, there are so many different like um, cultural belief systems and gods that, you know, have that whole, okay, this people started as humans. Like there are some gods in the Yoruba pantheon, for example, that started as humans and then ascended into godhood, right? If it is that, for example, you want to say which of the gods, for example, did not really have like that start, is going to be Olodumare, who's meant to be the beginning of it all and everything else. So I really loved how Nisi brought that in. I love the fact that, you know, we are exploring this relationship between gods and humans, and then to see how the gods are. And all I'm wondering is that if it is that they started off as humans, does that mean that it is time? It is this having this power, more power than you can ever dream of, and then seeing humans as just things you can play with and mold, seeing the world as something you can mold, right? Because Shioma is like, oh, that is the difference between us and the gods. Like gods change things on this cosmic scale. And I guess it just had me thinking that, is that, would Shioma become Amma in another 1,000 years? Or say 10,000 years, because, you know, I just found it very fascinating because then I started thinking about these gods that we were introduced to and wondering, like, how were they when they were humans? How were they before they had a millennia, you know, of living in this boredom, of being able to get everything that they want? Like, is that what changed them? Would Shioma become vastly different given another couple of millennia? So I found it very interesting because after I finished reading it, I was just like, oh, it was very interesting to see that. Of course, we don't want to because it's a short story and the story has ended where it is, but I just love that thought of, okay, exactly, this is what Godhood is, this is what Godhood becomes, this is what Godhood has the opportunity not to be, and Chioma deciding that she's going to take care of her own people and bless her own lands. And it just, I found it very interesting. So yeah, so that's basically my take on it.
I realized I didn't give a summary of the story. I knew there's something missing on this agenda. So to summarize the story, there's this girl named Tikoig who moves to the city of the gods with Kim Sin with her mom. They're basically like dodging her father, who's like trying to like send her out to work in the fields and stuff. And Kim Sin as the city of the gods is like such a weird place. Like in theory, no one should be starving. Everyone should be fine because there's like food holes that just randomly produce food like everywhere. There's water everywhere. The gods aren't super around, but like they kind of stop by and they provide entertainment and like TV shows and stuff. But basically, I guess because humans just have too much time on their hands, they're like people who will like bar people's access to the food holes. They'll just basically create these little hierarchies. Um, and that happens with Shioma and Shioma's mom. Like basically, one of the people who like runs a food hole takes a liking to Shioma's mom. Shioma's mom is not interested in him, and so he just like cuts them off. And they don't have food, they don't have money, and so there are legends that like gods who have like hurt people will like pay them back like with ridiculous like riches and gifts and stuff. And so Shioma's mom sees like a god's carriage passing by and kind of like throws herself in front of it, like trying to like like take an accident. And she actually ends up dying. And the goddess whose carriage it was, Amma, who like does a lot of stuff with entertainment, just kind of like takes Tikoig home with her in her carriage, like sedates her for like years. Like when she wakes up, like her hair is completely different. Her body's like changed and stuff, and she just decides that she's going to name her Shioma and she's going to be like her little like ward, like she's going to act in her plays. um Amma's going to have complete control over her. And so the story is about like Amma's time with Shioma, like learning the ways of the gods, and also how she eventually gets free. Like, there's this god Naiglu who, has an interest in humans, and Shioma, like, barters with him to get a bunch of stuff, under, like, Amma's watch, but also on the side, she kinda has a thing where, like, Naiglu handles finances for her and, like, is amassing, some sort of, like, wealth that we don't really know what it is until the end. And eventually, Amma decides she wants to marry Shioma, and she does that. Um, and she destroys some of Shioma's memories, which she said she wasn't gonna do, and they get in an argument, she does it anyway. And eventually, Amma decides that she wants Shioma to become a god, and to do that, she's basically gonna, like, kill her, and then there's, like, some body double that's made that's gonna be a god. And basically how Shioma gets free is that she had Naiglu basically buy her up a bunch of land, like a planet or something somewhere, and somehow sets it up so that, like, when she's, like, killed for godhood, like, one of her just, like, kinda stays, and then the body double goes to the planet, which apparently now there's people on the planet as well, and she's gonna, like, rule over this planet as a god. So that's the summary as I remember it. If I left out anything important, please let me know. You're muted, Jerry.
The version of Shioma that's on the new planet is not a god or is a god?
I can't remember,
Okay,
unfortunately.
I thought she was a god.
I
Yeah,
thought it was God Shoma because she wanted to
yeah,
rule
that's
these
what I thought
people.
too.
Yeah, she does talk about, blessing her people and
Yeah,
treating them right, and she speaks in this benevolent tone of overseer with the power to make their lives way better. Something that's saying that, based off of the history with her mother and how the disinterest of the gods contributed a lot to exactly what she had to go through. I could see why she was very invested in being a better god or goddess. I don't like. I think it was a gender neutral term. Like, I think they just use God for everybody. But yeah, so I think that the one on that planet was a god, like is a god, and that it was more of a, because the way I read it, like when I was reading it, it seemed okay. So they got married. There was the oh, I love you," but also not clue, and clearly she was just. I think she was like baby girl was playing like the long game, which I love for her. She was just like a con artist. I was like, her mother would be so proud. And then Amma was like, let's have a baby. And Selma is like, I would love to have a baby. Amma, you know, have a baby. Amma's like, nah, I don't want to, carry the baby. Selma's like, okay, I'll do that. Amma's like, nah, because the alternate bodied Shioma, which is so funny because like it had fantasy elements, but also sci-fi elements, and it was really cool. But like the alternate body Shioma, which was created to deceive the gods, was just there, right? The real Shioma, like ideally, she should have been killed and her essence transferred to the created Shioma because apparently they can't just let humans just evolve into godhood that way. But Amma loved Shioma as she was because she believed that the clone Shioma would not be real Shioma, right? But like having a baby would mean that everybody would know that this is the real Shioma, which Amma didn't want, which Shioma wanted, which was the basis for their argument. So I thought that what happened was that after Amma broke her promise and wiped out her memory of her mother, Shioma left. And I think it was after she left that she faked like, oh, her death. Although she did say that she's not sure if Amma believes her, but that right now Amma is focused on raising the newer Shioma, using the cells, the many tissue cells that actor Shioma had given whilst they were creating the body double thingy for the gods, and therefore will probably create a Shioma that is not as stubborn as the original. Like that was how I understood it.
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. But that's pretty thorough. So in terms of what I thought of godhood in this story, I thought it was interesting because we don't see them really doing godly stuff. Like they're almost like celebrities. Like they're just like, I'm just gonna go out on my yacht. I'm just gonna direct this like passion project for reasons. Um like yeah, like there's some god language they speak that gives them a lot of abilities, but like they don't seem to do much of anything with the abilities. Like I thought it was really interesting how a lot of their power is like based in like the machines and like the tech. And also like the fact that Tikoi, like Shioma's mom, was like put out of business by the gods. Like they're entertainers, and the gods are like, no, we're just putting television screens on every corner, and we're gonna make all the entertainment. Was like so interesting and so bizarre to me. Um, and I kind of wondered why they were even called gods in this world. Like, was this something that the gods had started up to be like, yeah, we're gods, like with this certain like connotation around it, or like did people just kind of see them doing stuff where they're more involved and like they assign that to them, or what it was?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, there was basically like Hollywood life, but like even more controlling and manipulative.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, because I remember when when Amma was like, "I need you to act in this thing, but you can't age. Like, you're just gonna stay. Your body's just gonna stay at the age you are at 14 for like 3 years. 'Cause that's how long it's gonna take to produce this picture." And like that just made my blood run cold. Um,
I
yeah, so
found
like, yeah.
I found the gods to be well, I found Amma to be very destructive, extremely destructive, and very like petty and vain. Um, but Ariana says it's almost like gods are just whoever is more technologically advanced. Yeah, and when in the first couple of pages of the short story, I was thinking, wait a minute, is this a commentary on like the very very sort of wealthy, like the Kardashian-y kind of people that we have right now who can basically, oh, big butts are in, let me go make one. Oh, natural butts are back, let me, you know whatever, revert. um and like, is that a commentary on very 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 wealthy influencer type people? Because I noticed that when Shioma's describing the gods and what they're able to do, like when she said, um my mom's mother was waiting until we saw the little carriage, I was like, little? I would expect a god to be in a very big carriage. So is this like just a car? Are we talking about a car? Um, and so I was wondering if Nisi was kind of asking us to think about the way we turn celebrities into gods, and
Mhm.
how we serve them, and how they owe us nothing, and they serve no purpose except to, and the ways in which the entertainment that they provide takes away from other things, right? Because there is a conversation about reality TV versus like musical theater, and so I wondered if there was a commentary on that, and maybe that's why we didn't get a lot deeper into godhood and the pantheon. Um, but then as the story went on, and she built more, sorry, they built more, we start to see more, right? We start to see gods in a way that distinguishes them from, that kind of, this is just upper middle class individuals who have access to technology and wealth. But at one point, when she's describing the gods, she says things like they have technology and machines, and the machines are inside their bodies, outside their bodies, inside the world, right? And I was thinking, okay, well, machines inside the body, like we already have that. Machines implanted in the body, well, we have that. And then machines outside of the body, we certainly have that. So just how different are these gods, right? From what we know now. Because they certainly didn't seem like the gods that we encounter in like N.K. Jemison's Inheritance trilogy, right? Like these are a little bit different, or a lot different. So
What did you think of I guess this kind of ties into like how the gods view humans in general, but what do you think of Amma and Shilma's like relationship, their dynamic? I can start on that one. Like at the beginning, I was like not really sure what was going on with her because she's like, this woman seems like really like weird about the fact that she killed my mom. Like something here is not adding up. And I was like, I don't know what to make of this. And then there's a point where Alma is just like very controlling of her. And like I was like, okay, this is like really, really weird. And then she's like, oh, and now we're getting married. I was just like, eh? At the wedding, there's a guy who's like, oh, this is the second one, or at least one of many, most recent. I was just like, very, very stressed out. I think it was, I don't know if it was interesting to me that no one stopped it. Like people were like, oh, here she goes again. And no one was like, hand her over. Like you're not in charge of this little girl anymore. But yeah, it was just so fascinating to me that Amma just controlled so much of Shioma, like her everything, and it still just was not enough for her. Like she's never off the stage. She's like feeding her lines, like even in their like personal relationship. Like it was wild to read.
There's so much oppression in that relationship. It was a very abusive, manipulative, and yes, Regina Renee, predatory relationship. And I felt like it was one of those relationships where you're oppressed by somebody and you're oppressed by them for so long, and you accept so much that then you start thinking that this is love or care or so on, right? There's actually what's that disorder that starts with M? Not Munchausen.
Is
It's
it Stockholm syndrome?
Stockholm. Yes, not an M, in fact. So I thought like maybe it was a version of that we saw, but also, I mean, Shioma was plotting from a very early point, and I think that that's one of the things I really loved about that character was that, you know, it yes, as Noria said, she definitely played the long game, but I found it really, really terrifying, actually, their relationship together. And yeah, just very scary. And Shoma just seemed trapped. And also, I think for me, the most scary part of the relationship was Alma's ability to control Shoma's emotions and to actually like kind of get into like like it, make her stop grieving her mother, um like actually impact her brain and her emotions and her like her chemistry, to the point where like how can she even trust what she's actually feeling because it's being so manipulated by her. um so I found that really, really difficult.
A quick thing from the audience.
I think
Ariana says,
me,
oh, sorry, I'll
oh,
go real
okay.
quick.
You
Ariana
want
says, how might this be a
yeah,
metaphor for slavery? Which wasn't an
okay.
angle I had considered.
Right. Because um I also looked at it as representative of relationships, like when there's a power dynamic in a relationship that is very flawed. Like this is how I see it a lot. Like I just see it in my head. I'm like, I'm seeing the picture of the 32, 35-year-old person who is convinced that, this 18-year-old person is perfect for them. And the question is, are they perfect for you, or are they perfectly moldable specimens that you can manipulate and tweak to fit into your desires? And what happens when it is that this person, because they will grow up, they will grow older, they would learn to speak their mind and be their own persons. What would happen when it is that, they reach that stage where they are then very critical and they are also aware of what it is that they want? Then that is when you see these people then move on from this person that they now believe is too old and then go find yet another younger person, which I think can also be representative of Amma deciding not to go after the original Shioma and instead just settling for yet the newer, younger version of Shioma that is moldable, malleable, and that can be manipulated to be what it is that she actually wants her to be. With regards to the question of, the relation, like how exactly can it be related to slavery? I do see that, right? Especially because, for example, there have been like instances, for example, in African countries with the Europeans coming in and basically choosing people and grooming them, wearing them up in this way to be their perfect little toys that they can, dress up and manipulate. And basically, you have people whose histories are like go back to this level of violence. And because of the fact that they need it to be complete, they strip them of all senses of identity. They force a new name on them, kind of like the way in which Amma did with Shioma. They basically, find a way to break their spirit and take away every memory of who they are, where they're from, the family that they have, so that, they become this new plaything that is separate and utterly theirs and they've made, and it's disgusting. But yeah, I definitely see that relationship with regards to that.
Mhm.
I think what was interesting in reading the audio, well, in terms of the name thing, I thought it was also interesting how I think when Amma came up with T-Quig's new name, she just picked it because she thought it sounded nice next to her. She said, Amma's Shoma. That sounds nice together. That's going to be your new name. So it was like pretty early on. But in terms of like T-Quig herself, um, I thought I think I was really interested in the reread on how she keeps things even from the reader. Like she's pretty impassive the whole time things are happening. Like she doesn't really react to all the things Amma's doing, except for the stuff around her mom, like in the beginning. But sort of like after that period, it's very like, Amma's doing this. It has this effect on me. Like not much commentary on it until the end. And I think I was really impressed by like one, her ability to like play this game for so long, but also like her strength that like she didn't just say I'm gonna stay here. Like she set up this plan and was gonna execute it. She had to play Niglu as well. Niglu might have been a little easier to play, but we also just don't see as much of him, so I don't really know what's going on with that. I felt like the narrator gave a lot of life to that too, because like when it came to things like I think it's like really stood out, like when like Amma decided that T-Quig wasn't gonna age, which is just like she decided I'm gonna be 14 for like this amount of years, and like the narrator sounded so tired when she said it. I thought it really brought another like dimension to the story that I didn't get the first time I read it.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any thoughts on that before we get into the ending?
No.
Okay, so I guess what did people think of the ending? We kind of talked about it a little bit, but I don't know if we really dug into it.
I was a little disappointed that, I think I was looking for a less gray outcome for Shioma. I was hoping certainly that she would succeed, but it was a little cringy for me when I started to hear her talk about her mortals and how she's going to treat her mortals and on her planet in her world. And the word you used, Noria, that benevolence, really came through in how she talked about her plans going forward. And like the horses and the foliage and this whole like I've got my own play place. I also I don't understand what the fertility trials are or what fertility mana is. And so I was a little bit confused by that. So there was a bit of a letdown there. But I did love, that moment at the end of the movie where like you see all of these little snapshots that come together and you see that the character who you thought was the victim has actually been masterminding all along. So I really liked that she was able to find a way at a really young age to manipulate a very manipulative God and survive. So I did like that, but it ended up being gray at the end, for me, morally gray, in a way that I was kind of like, okay, I guess I'm okay with that. But then the other thing that I appreciated at the end was, I wrote the word down, memoir, because it almost felt like it was written as a bit of a memoir, and I really liked that, because when you realize that she's writing this and looking back in time, like a couple of times when she speaks directly to the reader, when she says, I heard words, not in letters like the ones I'm writing to you right now, but I heard these kinds of words and these kinds of characters. So I liked that at the end we know that she's telling this story from the planet, from where she is now, and she's taking us through her origin story, right? Her God origin story. And I think there's a theme about, hurt people, and what happens when you experience oppression, and the small changes that you can make generationally to do things a little bit differently, right? So it might not be perfect, but it's something. So I appreciated the ending, although it wasn't 100% satisfying. Though I might have been bored by the ending that I was looking for. So there's that.
Actually did enjoy the ending as well. Like Jerry said, and like I said earlier, I like the fact that I was like, oh my god, she had been playing this long con all this while. Like, you go, girl, your mother will be so proud. Especially, like, we got that hint. There was that old bit of when she was negotiating with, is it Nigel? Nigel?
Niglu, yeah.
How is Niglu?
That's how I've been saying it.
Is it Niglu? Like, I like how when she was, negotiating with Nigel, and I was like, oh, she just basically thought of her mother, and all I was just thinking was that, you know what, Amma, you can, like, take away her grief, you can manipulate her emotions to not fully grieve her mother, you can have her mother's pieces scattered all over the world like you've done, which was an absolutely horrendous thing to do. You can take away her mother's name, but like they are the elements and traits that her mother has taught her that you can never take away because you wouldn't even know what to look for. And I did really enjoy that. And like, all I was just thinking was like with what Jerry said, like, I wondered if it was tied back to what I said about exactly when did the gods become the type of people that they became? Like, were they better people before? And I was just wondering if this memoir, this story that she's telling us, if she's also telling us because she wants to remember, to be able to come back to it, so that like anytime she starts becoming like Amma, for example, like one of these capricious gods, she can go back and remember her origin and remember what she's been through and remember what it feels like to be a human without any power, what it feels like to be in that in between space, being manipulated by a being that is way more powerful, wealthier, wiser, in a way, more connected than you are and has this power to upend your entire life, and how, to keep that in mind, right? So, Injeri saw it more as a memoir. I saw it as maybe it's a journal, like it's her actually writing this journal, not to herself, but to her future self, to remember all of these things and never forget and never become the same type of person that she ran away and escaped from. But I really did enjoy the ending.
When I was reading it the first time, I remember the ending felt joyous to me, and the second time I was like, "Is this a threat?" Like, is this actually a good thing that she had? Like, why, when she's getting her money together to buy this planet, did she like get the people specifically for the planet? Like, were they just there? Like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I don't know how I feel about it now, but I think I was making connections as I was reading. to stuff like Wild Seed by Octavia Butler, like this person who has to like outlive this like immortal person and like try and like duck and dodge and like evade them, and like how that changes who they are over time, just like being so entwined with this person. And also like My Soul to Keep by Tananarive Due, which is like a little bit more, it's like a basic association because that one's also about like emotional manipulation and abusive relationships, and like huge power differentials. Um, Actually, I guess that one's kind of similar because there is the main character who's kind of at a disadvantage does eventually change. So that's kind of what I was thinking of as I was going through it. But this time around, the ending felt so much more sinister to me than it did when I first read it. I was like,
Yeah.
Oh, so someone in the comment. Ariana's in the comments. I wonder if the gods were just folks who back in the day were more privileged, had more wealth, had more access to resources, medical care, technology, then diverged and diverged and diverged from those who had less of those things until they seemed like a different species altogether. Yeah, because it seems like the other people in the world don't have particularly advanced tech. Like they don't talk about it a whole lot.
No.
But it seems almost by design, you know, like the gods give them everything they want, so why would they make anything else? At least in Kemp Sin.
Yeah.
Yep. And especially because, once again, tying back to the fact that she has admitted that, that was their origin. Because, when the little girl was like, when Shioma was talking to the, why am I calling little girl when that is a god that is like 25 years old? But when Shioma was having that conversation with the younger god, and Shioma was like, okay, so if humans like disgust you so much, like, why care? And all I was just thinking is, of course, the gods will purposefully strip humanity of all those things that they have, because that is what makes them gods. And they do know that if humans should get access to to those things, then the playing field becomes leveled, and they lose their source of entertainment and the playthings that they have. So yeah, I definitely think it's like people, like Jerry said earlier, that whole thing of people having this access to all this wealth and resources and connections and privilege and technology and everything, and then just they keep going higher and higher and higher and higher and higher until they hit this peak and then become the self-proclaimed gods of this entire universe. And there we have it.
I think I was also interested in thinking about the ending that, like, you know, the book, I guess, or the story gets its name from the ending, Shioma's Land. Like, it ends with her getting this big plot of land. And I was like, I'm wondering why she kept the name that Amo gave her. Like, she doesn't go by Tikoik. It's Shioma's Land. And thinking, I guess, what that says about, you know, her life once the story ends and stuff like that.
I thought it was just representative of the fact of her acknowledging that she can't go back to being that girl. Like names, if like, names mean things, and names also are fitting for exactly who we are, the experiences we've gone through to become those persons. And like right now she is Shioma, but then she has to determine, like, okay, this is who I am and this is what this name means. And even though Ama is the one that initially gave her the name, the Shioma that we see at the end as coming to our own and is our own person and can, make that stand and take that decision.
Any final thoughts on the story before we get into like wrapping up the event?
Just one thing that I thought was really clever, the different kinds of speech, like contract speak and juvenile, whatever. But there are like 3 or 4 different kinds of speech. And so there was this code switching moment that happened when Nigel and Shioma meet each other for the first time. And I really thought it was really deftly written, and really interesting. Also, Shioma's mother did what she could to teach her the ways of the gods so that she would be able to survive. And so if you look at the story generationally, you have a mother. I think the mother intended to die, I don't think it was a slip. I think she intended to die. And I think that it was in an effort to get her child into the land of the gods. I think it was a plan. Um, and and it started before that particular moment where she gets into that accident, in a way, as a way to kind of to escape, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, Chloe, the life that she would have had to live was a life of servitude, under the dominion of a man. So that's where she starts off, right? Fleeing. Again, and this is why, like, I also wonder when she says her mother survived the fertility trials, I wonder about the connection between her aversion to, surrogacy through a machine or an animal, um, and her mother surviving the fertility trials. Is that what the fertility trials were? I don't know. But there's a whole bunch of legacy that she continues from her mother. And so even though she doesn't remember her name, she remembers a lot about her and is able to create for herself, rightly or wrongly, a life that has transcended from what her life would have been. Again, good or bad. Like, she ends the story as a god. She begins it as a child running away from a dude.
Anything from you, Noria?
No, I think we've covered it. Interestingly enough, I actually did not consider that a mom might have wanted to die, but like after enjoying it, I'm like, I could totally see that. I could totally see that. It's yet another way in which a mother, like a mother has always, basically with the way in which a mother has lived her life and all the decisions her mother's taken, it has always been okay for the survival of her child, for a child to have the best possible life that that she could have, one where she is in control, right, of our own life story and journey. And I think that if we're exploring that her mom has been like raising her and giving her these skills, like these are the skills for you to survive, whether it's in the land of mortals or in the land of the gods. And I just, when you think about it coming full circle, then actually I think it's actually, I never considered it, but yeah, I definitely see it possible. And it makes the ending even much more satisfying because she has come quite a long way.
Mm.
Quite a long way.
Well, thanks for discussing this with me, everybody. There's a lot of stuff I don't think of until I start talking about it with people. So I feel like the discussion is just as much fun as reading the story on my own.
Yeah.
So in terms of closing up, I was going to announce the winner of the giveaway. So this year we had a giveaway sponsored by Alicia of Birdie in the Books. And the winner is the YouTuber Tangible Reads. So I will reach out to you the next few days and ask for your mailing address so that can be sent along to you. Thank you to Alicia for sponsoring this giveaway. And then on I guess, it's just a note. It's just a note like any other.
No, it's not.
Black SFFathon is ending. This is the last year. I told the host in advance, but I didn't want to like rain on because I'd known a few months prior that I wanted this to be the last year, but I didn't want to like rain on the Black SFFathon parade by like rolling that out with the announcements. I was like, I'm just gonna sit on this until it's done. But yeah, this is the last year. It was fun. I enjoyed it, but yeah, I feel like things have a season. I feel like the season for Black SFFathon is done for me, so not planning on hosting it again in the future. But thank you so much to everyone who's participated over the years, for sharing photos, for interacting with us on Twitter, sharing TBRs, coming out to the lives and the events. You've made this such a great event and like such a fun year. And yeah, it really made this, the work that went into it worth it. So thank you for that. And yeah, that was everything from me. I have an author interview next week on my channel with Tel Colvin. If you're want to stop after that, that's gonna be fun. I can't think of a nice tie into anything we discussed today, but maybe it'll come up during the during the interview. Thanks, Regina Renee. Thanks, Kay. But yeah. Anyone else have anything else they want to add or promo? Oh, wait. There was a audience question. If we had 2023 releases we were looking forward to off the top of our heads.
Not gonna lie, this year has been like 2022 has been leading from 2022. In fact, like this year has been a quite interesting year. It also coincided with me being on a book buying ban, so like I'm certain if I see, I'll be like, oh, this is cool. But I've actually actively not gone looking for books because I've just not been reading as much. So I think I would just leave in Jerry and Chloe to answer that because for me, it's at the moment not really because I've actually not gone looking for any because reading has been hard. Reading has been hard.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that question either. Because like I read slower than I buy, so you know, I don't have, and I also read a lot of backlist. But I would like to just talk about like a couple of short story collections that are recent, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Unless you wanted to answer that question with your 2023 anticipated reads, Chloe.
I know. I mean, if we're talking short stories that are coming out, Yvette, Lisa, and Lovu has a short story collection coming out, Drinking from Graveyard Wells, and Darius Flo also has a collection coming out. I don't know if it has a cover or a title yet, that one, but
the Drinking from Graveyard Wells, isn't that November 2022?
I looked at the pub date on. I'm going off of Goodreads. It says like March 2023.
Oh, okay.
If that's not correct, then I apologize. But
no, I'm not doubting you. I just I guess I'm correcting my own memory.
It could have moved, and I wouldn't know. But I think really those are the two ones I was most looking forward to next year.
Okay. I'll grab the short story collections that are coming out now or that just came out that I want to just let people know about. They might find it particularly interesting. So this one is very on brand. So this is Our Fruiting Body. It's called Our Fruiting Bodies.
I love this cover.
Yeah, so I got an advanced reader copy, and this is a collection of stories by Nisi Shawl, who we read today. And it says, from the sharp, sweet confessional of their Peter Pan-inspired awfully big adventure, through the melting ambidextralities of Just Us, from the early dizzy-eyed quest at the heart of Looking for Lilith, through the newly unfurling tendrils that pierce the grounds of I being young and foolish, Nisi Shaw's search for the power of fiction's truths puts pure, precious gifts right here, right in your hands, ripe and ready for reading. So this releases, so it's a collection of short stories, releases November 1st, 2022. And so there's that, Our Fruiting Bodies by Nisi Shaw.
So right before my birthday, I might treat myself to
and then
a little of this cover.
Africa Risen, which I'm sure folks have heard about. So this is co-edited by Cherie Renee Thomas, Ogenechove Donald Ekpeki, and Zelda Knight. And there are short stories from Africans from the continent and from the diaspora. And I think like that is an important like effort in this particular book. So I'm looking forward to reading that. And that also is a November 22 release. And then this came out earlier this year. I haven't read it yet, but this is the second edition of Midnight and Indigo. and this is 19 speculative stories by Black women writers. I read the first Midnight in Indigo, and it was wonderful. So, Midnight in Indigo is a Black-owned sort of publishing house and source for writing workshops. And so there are a lot of very affordable writing workshops. They usually run from 2 to 6 sessions, and they're usually a couple of hundred US. And so you can meet other Black writers, women writers, from novice to more advanced. And they've got really great things like writing from your diaries, writing from dreams, writing short stories or flash fiction, or getting started on your novel, or pitching articles. So for people who are like me, like reading a lot, but really curious about writing, those are options as well. So I just wanted to talk about those. Thanks for letting me do that, Chloe. And also, Chloe, thank you very much for the Black SFFathon for the 3 years. It's bittersweet that it's ending. But, your channel has done a lot for, for emerging writers, and you're so thoughtful in the ways that you put your ideas together, in the ways that you like craft creative spaces for readers to engage. And I think your nomination for an Ignite Award for Best Critic is an example of how, in such a short period of time, you have attracted the attention and the admiration of the speculative fiction community. And the Black SFFathon is only one of the ways that you've done that. So I'm sad that we're not going to see you at the helm of the Black SFF again, or other Black SFFathon. But thank you very much for what you've done for the BookTube community, and also what you're doing for Black speculative fiction. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Njeri. That
And
means a lot.
and we look forward to what you do in the future, because I think that a lot of stories and authors and books I've discovered and I've loved have been because of your recommendations, because of the thought and care, and just how far you go to ensure that, whether it is that you're looking for a short story, or you're looking for an audiobook, or you're looking for an ebook, there's a level of consideration that you extend to everybody, especially when you're giving us recommendations, that I think is just beautiful, and I consider myself very fortunate. I think we as a community are very fortunate and very, very lucky to have you present with us. So thank you for all that you do, and we cannot wait for what you have to do in the future, because it's going to be amazing.
Thanks, Noria. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Thanks for coming out here today and spending some time with us as we get into this. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. I know some people it's later in the day than others. I have a whole day ahead of me. Some people are probably about to go to sleep. But whatever it is you're going to do, I hope it brings you joy and feeds your soul and makes you rest well. So thank you, everybody. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.